When I started this channel, I told myself I wouldn't editorialize too much, but I'm great at lying to myself, so here we go. This isn't going to be some annoying pedant rant about how Ghostbusters Afterlife ruined my favorite franchise, because I don't give a fuck about Ghostbusters. I'm not even sure what I expected when I walked into the movie theater to see another Ghostbusters sequel.
Well, I don't know what I expected.
What I care about, and what I want to talk about, is this trend of new coming-of-age horror that lacks any coming of age. To discuss the positives before the negatives, I'll say that it's a worthwhile movie. Go out and see it. Paul Rudd is good.
You know what, I don't want to give too much away, but imagine Beethoven if he contracted rabies and just started mauling children.
And the lead, McKenna, steals the show.
Hey, maybe you will make a friend out here.
Make them out of what?
Also, I found out while editing that she sings the end song for the credits, which is honestly solid.
'Cause a ghost never leaves a haunted house.
She carried the film with her performance, an actress doing her best with a script that's often lazy and values sentimentality over story progression.
What's wrong? You love school.
I love learning. This is a state-sponsored work camp for delinquents.
A script that attempts to sell the same sentimentality under the guise of a coming-of-age aesthetic. But they're selling it to grown adults. There's nothing here for the kids but toys.
Bankman, over here, it's Bug-Eye. I think he's got his eye on you, Winston.
It's hard to care about any of these kids' struggles because they don't struggle. There's nothing for them to learn because they've seemingly known it from the start.
Man, I love that sound.
And above all else, they don't face the big bad on their own.
Go on, 2, 1.
It's patronizing when you consider other cult classic coming-of-age movies that came before them. And I think it's more important than ever to get this type of movie right. So if this is a little too long for you in terms of a video essay, give it a like or subscribe so you can circle back to it later. This is going somewhere, I promise. Chapter 1. The kids are alright. You may not know what I'm talking about, especially when it comes to the very niche coming-of-age horror genre. You may have only seen mimics like Stranger Things or remakes like It. So let me introduce you to 3 originals.
You're supposed to say 3. That's the It.
Monster Squad is basically Goonies, but replace the Fratellis with Stan Winston's baller-ass interpretations of the OG Universal monsters.
Question 2. Is Frankenstein the name of the monster or the guy who made him?
The guy.
Right.
Together, a treehouse club of kids managed to prevent the world from coming to an end by befriending Frankenstein and kicking Wolfman in his nards.
Wolfman's got nards! Come on! Come on!
In The Lost Boys, 2 brothers have to fight for their life not to become gay. Sorry, don't know why that's in the script. Not to become vampires.
I know who I am now, Sam.
Vampires here are definitely not in any way symbolic of gay culture in the late 80s.
I told you not to come in here anymore.
There's no subtext here. Nothing really to read into, so just enjoy the sexy sax man like a goddamn heterosexual American.
What's under the door? We accidentally summoned demons who used to rule the universe to come and take over the world.
And in the gate, a young boy and his sister and his best friend accidentally open up a gate to hell in their suburban backyard and have to fight for their life against these little clay guys that are just actually pretty cute to close the door.
So what's under the door?
Will you close the fucking doors?
You guys are weird.
There are plenty more, but these 3 all came out the same summer and each in their own way represent the aesthetic that shows like Ghostbusters Afterlife seek to emulate. So throughout the video I'll be making callbacks to these classics to explain what they did right.
Why don't you try some noodles? The worms.
I didn't realize you enjoyed eating worms, Nick.
No.
They are worms.
There's worms wiggling around on my plate.
It's worm-like, but not actually good.
We stole that idea from the Lost Boys.
Chapter 2. Something to latch onto. I'd be lying if I said these characters were more fleshed out than those in Ghostbusters Afterlife. They're all equally two-dimensional, but the factor that the originals have that the new film lacks is that these kids are human.
Maybe we can be like Math Squad instead, you know. Do math problems, stay home. Or Nature Squad. We could look at rocks, collect birds, not be dead. See, it's this whole death thing I'm not crazy about.
When I was a kid, I didn't care if the characters were fully fleshed out. I was looking for someone to empathize with, an avatar to root for.
Where you going, Rudy?
I'm in the goddamn club, aren't I?
And I don't think that it's any different for kids today. It's obviously easier for a kid like me to latch onto a couple white suburbanite geeks that watched horror movies, read comic books, Fangoria, listened to metal music, and were unforgivingly foul-mouthed.
Come on, don't be chicken shit.
Because I was that kid, and those were my friends. For context, I did edgelord shit all the time, like show up to every school pick in my Catholic school with an Exorcist t-shirt.
Your mother sucks cocks in hell, Karis.
I'd show up to class with a bullet hole in my head for no reason. I wasn't political, I was just a shithead.
What's it like being the coolest guy in town?
I once gave my science teacher a heart attack during a lab where we were using razor blades when I swapped out a real one for one I dulled at home and slit my wrist Martin style in front of her. I also once made a latex replica of a friend's finger, fake nail polish bone and all, for the express purpose of her scaring the crap out of our shop teacher into thinking that she had sliced her finger off in a table saw.
Is that right?
As you can imagine, it was not uncommon to find myself waiting outside of the principal's office, only to have a friend ushered in moments later and seated beside me for some other dumb shit that they did.
Can you guess what's in these file folders? I'll give you a hint. Discipline reports.
My friends and I would sit around and watch these older horror movies and assign ourselves to the characters. There seemed to be something more at stake because these kids put their asses on the line in 80s horror films. They didn't always survive. There were stakes. Sometimes they straight up got murked by the monster. Ghostbusters doesn't fail at creating someone to latch onto entirely. I think Phoebe is a great character for girls that like STEM and feel ostracized for their interests, but that's more on the performance than the script, and I'll discuss more why later. When it comes to others, Finn Wolfhard just lazily reprised his role of boy likes girl, starting to wonder why this guy's presence is a prerequisite for every coming-of-age horror movie that comes out. He's meant to be the spiritual successor of Venkman, but his jokes land about as well as Harrison Ford in a fucking biplane.
Oh, fuck! Not his first crash, actually.
He just comes across as an ineffectual, dickless weeb from start to finish.
Is this true? Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
Ow. Speaking of lazy podcast, yes, that's his name. Seems to be the pathetic result of the writing team asking each other, what are kids like these days?
I'm Phoebe.
Oh, cool. I'm Podcast.
Why do people call you Podcast?
Oh, I call myself Podcast because of my podcast.
Have you actually ever met anyone named
Podcast?
No, that's why you picked a dumb fucking name.
Fuck you.
So the original movies I've discussed were not perfect when it came to representation. It's almost always a gaggle of white boys, but can you really call this representation? There's nothing to latch on to with this group of Ghostbusters, and that's partially because of something I mentioned earlier. Chapter 3, Growth and Failure. Character growth isn't a requisite for every movie, but this isn't a fucking Coen Brothers film.
What did we learn, Palmer?
I don't know, sir.
I don't fucking know either.
This is a coming-of-age horror. The fact that these kids aren't automatically perfect at catching ghosts is the best part of the movie. Phoebe seems braver and more capable by the end. But that's more on the actress than the script, because she's seemingly calm and collected from the start, according to her dialogue.
Aren't you just a little bit freaked out right now? Overstimulation calms me.
Sorry, Venkman. I'm terrified beyond the capacity for rational thought.
So let's talk setup and payoff. There's a setup and payoff in this film, and when it happens, it's like a tall glass of water in a screenwriting desert.
Drinking your own pee is truly unpleasant.
The metal-eating ghost that they find and capture is later used to melt the bars off of a prison to get their gear back. But the writing team forgot to apply this setup and payoff to the characters. They don't earn the talent it takes to face off against the big baddie. And sidebar, in this scene, they had an easy joke just waiting to be used. They could have just let the ghost out and had it simply phase through the roof, only to have the cop's daughter turn the corner with keys. Failure is funny, and it makes your audience sympathetic to the comedic heroes.
Get her!
Something that the original Ghostbusters got. But when your character is brave, competent, and a kid genius out of the gate, it immediately negates any growth from failure. No one wants to watch the struggle of a Mary Sue that doesn't struggle. If you're going to come at me with some shit of, oh, well, in the original Ghostbusters, Egon was also just a genius, I know. That wasn't a coming-of-age movie.
You know, it's just occurred to me we really haven't had a completely successful test of this equipment.
I blame myself.
So do I.
And in that movie, Egon constructed the pack himself. He didn't simply slide down a fire hall pole and find it in a drawer.
I don't think I've ever looked in this drawer. Wow, a gun!
I'm getting real tired of kid heroes not earning their talents because the filmmakers want to jump to the next plot point. Without failure and growth from that failure, possibly the two most human qualities, what kid is going to latch onto your character? Take this scene from the beginning of the film.
What is this?
Hello. You know, there's a highly entertaining movie about a killer dog happening right over there.
Is this a seismic map?
Yes. How did you know that?
Because it's a map of seismic activity.
They basically use Paul Rudd to give an info dump on the plot, despite the fact that all the information given to Phoebe is stuff she already knows.
This little P wave, followed by a large S wave.
Yeah, I'm not an idiot.
Clearly.
The fact that she doesn't come across completely annoying in this scene is a testament to her acting. We saw that she was great at electrical engineering, but why does she simply know about tectonic plates and geology as well? I'm not asking for much here. Just show her up late the night before, reading her textbook while playing chess. And I'm also not saying that I could have written this film better, but it's very easy to rework the dialogue to show that she's earned the knowledge about tectonic plates. Indulge me.
Is this a seismic map?
Yes. How did you know that?
Page 60.
Pardon?
It's easier for me to organize and filter large amounts of information with page numbers or mental markers. Otherwise, it just results in intellectual overstimulation.
Oh, okay. That's good. You're reading ahead. How far did you get?
The last page.
You read all of it? It's the first day.
I like to learn. Is that weird?
But not at all. I love to learn. It's always good to be prepared.
What do you call someone who's prepared to be a father? Readily apparent.
Was that a joke?
Yes, that's why I winked.
And scene.
Now, you may have found my example bad.
That's terrible.
But you get the point. She has to earn that knowledge in some way. And again, before I continue, I want to stress that this is constructive criticism with examples rather than some prescriptive rant where I revile the film and talk about how I could have done a better job. I don't think that. Let's talk about the proton pack that I mentioned earlier. You know, the one that's in the cellar that seems to have a fire pole as its entrance and exit. Great design choice, Egon.
Got it. You're a genius.
Despite knowing nothing of the Ghostbusters, when she finds the proton pack, she immediately recognizes that it's a particle accelerator.
How on earth did you build such a small cyclotron?
Which is normally the size of a warehouse. And the icing on the really fucking hard to believe cake is that she knows exactly how to fix it.
2 of the CRT emitters are missing.
Picture this instead. She finds the schematic for a proton pack along with the radioactive isotope that's in the cupboard and certain other difficult to acquire parts in his cellar. You know, the kind of stuff that gets you flagged when you order it on Amazon.
Every once in a while. It's a dildo.
Little bits and pieces, but not the whole thing. And we spend a healthy montage of her summer making the jerry-rigged pack with podcast. He seems to be very keen to the tech by the end of the film, so why not make that make sense? Most content creators have to be savvy enough with electronics in order to build their rigs and fix their equipment on the fly. It's far too expensive to start up if you can't, especially when you're a kid. Have podcast do some basic soldering. Have the RC ghost trap be his idea, rather than just have it appear in the movie. Have him play to his talents, record the ghost whistle and use it as instant playback in their first battle, even though it doesn't help at all. It gives us a chance to latch on to these characters and understand their strengths and weaknesses. Phoebe's mother is broke, drunk, and indifferent, so have her teacher order the different parts online for these kids, under the guise of a summer project.
Should we open it?
And when Phoebe and Podcast miss class and inevitably order something that sets off a red flag, have the teacher deliver it personally so he can see firsthand what she's making.
It's a service I provide.
Art.
Well, I'm also an escort. That came out wrong.
You can keep the scene where they gush over the ghost trap and Paul Rudd says, "Science is punk rock as hell." Put more of those in the film. That's what we need. Some reckless teacher overseeing kids building a particle accelerator from a dead man's blueprint. Have Podcast get electrocuted across the room. It's funny when kids get electrocuted.
Totally, yes.
Plus, it would explain his hair. It would make more sense for the story as well for these kids to build a proton pack thanks to this little plot hole.
One morning I go to work. An Ecto-1, our old Cadillac, is gone. His neutrino thrower, collider pack, all the traps, 16 ounces of fuel isotope, all gone. He cleaned us out.
Are you sure about that?
Did you read the script, Dan? Be honest.
That
script
can't stop me because I can't read.
The same applies to the brother. No 16-year-old without extensive automotive knowledge can simply get a rust bucket to turn over without any tribulation. Can we stop having scenes in movies where someone turns a ratchet in the engine bay of a car and then it starts? That's not how combustion engines work. Have a 5-second scene where he watches a YouTube tutorial on fixing an old hearse and the talking head says something akin to like, "Smash that like button and subscribe. And remember, before we get started, you're gonna need a lot of parts." And he looks up from his phone to the parking lot of junkers behind the barn and nods with a certain affirmation. He can fix the car. He can get the girl. He doesn't have to intuit the knowledge. You can take it from me. YouTube is a great resource when you're broke and trying to keep your cheap-ass car held together with bullshit and bubblegum. Give some scenes between the brother and sister where they can help each other in their passions. He seems mechanically minded. Have him fabricate parts she needs from the junkyard out back. And she seems like someone who understands the basics of electrical engineering. Together they could help spot each other's failings. Maybe work and design that ramp that appears in the movie. You know, develop a bond between them because siblings. Listen, none of what I've mentioned takes any real time, and that's the beauty of a montage. Even if it took an extra 10 minutes of screen time, this is a story, not a race. The root system is there in the script. Phoebe is superficially a scientist that does nothing scientific.
I'm a scientist.
These kids are auto-savants in whatever they need to be in order for the plot to move forward.
Phoebes, be a dear and break into your grandfather's house.
So how can any kid struggling to learn their passion feel represented? Speaking of passions, there's another aspect of coming-of-age horror that this film tried to shoehorn in, but it just didn't work.
I knew it! You're the head vampire!
Sam, don't start this again.
Chapter 4. Defensive Passions. This is about kids giving pushback for their passions when everyone around them calls it kid stuff.
Science is real. Monsters are not.
We don't know that, sir.
This stage is what truly makes it a coming-of-age movie, and not just a horror film. Normally in these films, the adults are in the background, yet still have all the agency.
And keep this up, and you're not gonna look at those monster magazines.
The protagonists are fool characters, the ones that know what's happening because they've seen it on TV and have more credulity than adults when it comes to believing the supernatural circumstance they find themselves in, but are nevertheless unheard.
Did you hear a word I said? The guys are dead. Get a clue? Something's out there and it's killing people. And if it's monsters, nobody's gonna do a thing about it but us.
Still, their belief in themselves, in spite of the adults, is what gives them the edge to actually do something about it.
Stuck on this, you son.
In the Monster Squad, the cop father keeps trying to fight the monsters and keeps failing miserably. His little kid has to come to his aid, and even his attempt to kill the Wolfman fails because he doesn't understand the threat like the kids do. Dynamite doesn't kill werewolves, silver bullets do. The adults usually clue into the supernatural struggle that the kids are facing in the last act when a vampire shows up at their house, or kills their cop partner with a stick of dynamite. This trope is reflective of the Charlie Brown disconnect that kids have with adults. The grown-ups either can't understand or are being willfully ignorant to the problems that the kids face.
Problem is, 2,000-year-old dead guys do not get up and walk away by themselves.
So they have to go it alone. The trope of the unbelieving adult serves a purpose in Lost Boys or Monster Squad or The Gate, because even the kids have a hard time believing what's going on. But when it appears in Ghostbusters, it makes no sense.
We caught a ghost tonight.
Dirt farmer's family.
The adults in this world would not have an issue believing in ghosts. They attacked New York twice. People have a hard time forgetting attacks on New York. Did your whole world have collective amnesia? Or are there Gozer conspiracy theorists akin to 9/11 truthers screaming about how ghosts can't melt steel beams? Hey, fuck! The pushback here should have been more centered on the struggle between the mom who hates science and the daughter who loves it.
I'm glad you found yourself here. I really am. But all I see are reminders that I didn't mean a thing to him.
Never supporting her passions because it reminds her too much of her father that left her for his passion. It exists, kind of. You could argue it, but it's meh. It's meh. She's far more indifferent than antagonistic. She's just a kind of a lazy drunk. You really could have fleshed it out in this scene where she's talking to Paul Rudd.
But science is amazing. Science is pure. It's an absolute. I mean, it's an answer to all the madness.
It's fine to have the Ghostbusters show up at the end of the film.
Have you missed us?
But only after her and the crew successfully defeat the big bad, in order to validate Phoebe's interest in reviving her grandfather's technology. When the mother sees her victory, she comes around to supporting the passions of her daughter. There you go, you got yourself an arc. But when you have the original heroes show up and be anything other than complete failures, it steals the thunder from your heroes, which leads to the next topic. Chapter Agency. The sum of everything that I've discussed comes down to this. Coming-of-age horror ultimately is about kids finding their power or agency.
Who are you?
We're the Monster Squad.
In Ghostbusters Afterlife, anything she accomplishes or her satanic mechanic brother manages to accomplish
How about that?
is due to a healthy dose of hand-holding, sometimes literally. Don't get me wrong, I'm alright with Gramps' ghost hands steadying the proton pack from beyond the graves. There is a healthy tradition in horror of sympathetic Gramps helping kids fight the big bad when they've gotten themselves in over their heads.
One thing about living in Santa Carla I never could stomach. All the damn vampires.
And there are some examples of this grandpa trope that should never be mentioned. But that's all we needed. The hands on the pack, and maybe the final hug to his daughter as he smiles awkwardly over her shoulder and winks at Phoebe. Something subtle always feels more sentimental. Admittedly, I think the scene had heart, but a disinterested Bill Murray trading quips with an ethically questionable CGI rendering of Harold Ramis is just,
I thought you might turn up.
Let alone the rest of the cast.
Stop! He's already dead.
Besides, it doesn't make any sense contextually because they just set off 100 fucking ghost traps. How did he not get sucked in along with Gozer?
Did you know that each year more than 20,000 people die? Well, this year you may have passed away without even being aware of it.
What I'm getting at is it's patronizing and annoying when you put it alongside a movie like Lost Boys or Monster Squad where the kids are literally exterminating monsters like they are roaches.
That's gotta be some cockroach.
Bite your head off, man.
Or The Gate, where a grade schooler loses his best friend and his sister and has to face a demon king from hell alone with only a rocket. Kids kicked ass. The adults help in these films, but the final triumph is accomplished by the kids. It's the kids that drive a stake through the heart of the monster. It's the kids blowing the monsters away with a shotgun or casting them back to hell. The struggle is theirs alone, and their failings earlier in the film mean something by the end. Having 3 Ghostbusters join in for a case of Deus Ex Machina in the last 10 minutes of your film, rather than having the kids that you've set up and established for the entire movie save the day, completely robs them of their victories up until that point. Go ahead and disagree with me if you want. Joke's on you, they removed the utility of the dislike button. What I'm getting at here is that Avatar feeling I spoke of. How when I was a kid I would derive agency from these kids on the screen when they won out against the monsters despite their size and age, often defending their parents, and that feeling gets completely deflated by this ending.
Pete Venkman from the Home Office. Thanks for pitching in.
That's my major issue with the movie. Chapter Jesus, is he still going? Isn't he lost potential?
What do you call a dead polar bear? Anything you want. It can't hear you now.
I don't hate Ghostbusters. It just stunk of lost potential to be like some of the movies I loved to watch when I was growing up. You might get an air from me that I look at these films with rose-colored glasses and think that they're perfect, and I enjoy them a lot, but they're far from perfect. They have some colorful language that I'm sure most kids heard in their schoolyard growing up, but regardless didn't age well outside of a Halo match.
I mean, when they send you to school, what they tell you about
homosexuals.
What'd you say?
Bundle of sticks.
What'd you say?
Bundle of sticks.
It's summer party. And you're not invited, so don't get all...
Developmentally delayed. Cigarette.
Hey!
I don't think you know what gay means.
And one scene in particular in Monster Squad is super messed up. Saying it didn't age well implies that there was a time when it was cool to blackmail your sister into telling you her sexual history by threatening to release unsolicited nudes of her to her school? What the actual fuck, Black & Decker? Also, yeah, that was the writing team for the film. No relation.
Hello?
Mrs. Smith, this is Principal Vagina. No relation.
These movies basically have all the same gaggle of white middle-class kids, so they completely lack any representation, as I discussed before, but that's still a problem today.
LL Cool J made it all the way through Deep Blue Sea. That was in the water, Sean, with sharks, and Sam Jackson's ass still got swallowed whole.
And let's get further into that. Even when there is representation done in media, sometimes it feels tacked on. It may not be the same exact tokenism as 80s movies, but it's what Mike from Red Letter Media calls passive-aggressive, and I couldn't agree more.
They're so phony. Is this a new term, passive-progressive? It's like a play on passive-aggressive?
Media is willing to wink at or pretend that there's representation, but the moment the audience reacts poorly to a character that's a poorly written afterthought, they drop them from the next movie. And it's not surprising, these are companies, not people. They have no value system.
It's absolutely a viable corporate strategy to harness toxic fandom in order for a company to get what they want.
And the representation that they put on the screen is driven ultimately by profit. Also, complete sidebar, but with films like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Friday Part 2, Silver Bullet, Night of the Creeps, and the list goes on, why does it feel like they did a better job representing persons with disabilities 40 years ago than most modern horror films today?
Oh, fuck you too. You'd try it. You would let me. You'd want me to. You wish. We done.
They were not a monolith. Sometimes they survived, sometimes they died a hero, sometimes they died unceremoniously. And I think that's kind of cool because it's kind of patronizing again to give your character plot armor simply because they have a disability. Maybe I'm wrong. If kids of all walks of life want to feel represented, they can watch some modern media, but if they want kids that have an actual edge to them, human characters that stand unflinching against the horde and make rational decisions, they'll have to turn to these coming-of-age cult classics. And that's the point I'm getting at with this critique of genre. We should take what works from these films and improve on what doesn't. It's about squandered potential. New coming-of-age horror has a chance at flushing out better characters than the ones that rolled off of Stephen King's coke-dusted fingers in the 80s. These new movies could and should write more human characters and avoid tropes like the gifted girl, the magic Negro, the kid genius, and the Indian burial ground. New coming-of-age horror has so much potential to write heroes from all different walks of life in order to make kids feel included. Indigenous, people of color, persons with disabilities, you name it. They can all have that avatar character that I wax poetically about. Just write the characters well, and the rest will follow. So long as they are real kids facing unreal problems, the core of what made those original movies great, and why I keep coming back to them, and people like me as well, I think that you got a recipe for success. Chapter Can't Stop, Won't Stop. Fuck it, let's go. The kids aren't alright. If you're still here, you may wonder why I'm so fixated on a movie in such a small subgenre, but all this came to mind because of a conversation I had with someone in the comments section of the video. A conversation where I revealed to myself what I had been doing with all these video essays on horror lately, from The Thing and Dead Space to Hereditary to Exorcist to Candyman. We were basically chatting about monsters and their reality, and I said, I think monsters are how we cope with the big, black, vacuous, uncaring universe. They are metaphors for traumas and things about the human condition that we do not wish to face. And for most of our history, we created avatars of them. We made ghosts of grief, vampires out of those that drain us emotionally, and we reasoned away killers as inhuman animals like werewolves or simply pure evil because it was easier to think that than face the reality that we're all capable of violence against our neighbor. We create these monsters because as scary as they are far more comforting than coming to terms with the fact that no one is in control and the universe is indifferent. Now this obviously sounds depressive to anyone other than Dr. Manhattan.
I don't want to live on this planet anymore.
But there is a light in it because the monsters lose. Normally, anyhow.
So, what were you gonna be when you grew up?
And even if someone sometimes bites it in these old movies, the kids usually pull out a win in the end. The point is that we all have to learn from an early age to fight these quote-unquote monsters, or we'll be swallowed whole by the void. And I think kids have always been smarter than we give them credit for. Okay, maybe not that smart.
Got it. You're a genius.
And less afraid of horror movies than we think they should be.
They are. And it is PG. I'm fucking telling you, it's PG.
Kids today know they are inheriting a dumpster fire through no fault of their own, and they know they're absolutely powerless to do anything about it, because much like the movies I've discussed, the majority of adults in positions of authority are willfully ignorant to the reality of the situation.
I have more serious things in my mind than girls in school. There's things I'm dealing with that you can...
Things I wouldn't understand.
Perhaps seeing themselves on screen, struggling and learning and winning against all the horrible shit that only horror can personify, will provide an antidote against the apathy and cynicism.
Jesus Christ, that's Jason Bourne.
Like I said, the monsters don't always win. Humanity has been doing its damnedest to end the world since it began, and with every doomsday scenario that humans did to themselves, we seem to figure a way out of it. We've navigated the Cold War and we apparently stopped the ozone from depleting, and it's gonna take some really fucking smart kids to grow up to science the shit out of these big dumb problems that we've created for ourselves.
Super news. We really want to hear about it.
Yeah, but we're kind of trying to save the world right now. Oh, okay, cool. I'm in. How can I help?
This particular type of movie feels relevant and important, and it's why I made this video, because kids need to see the hope at the bottom of Pandora's box so they can believe that there's actually a good future they can work towards creating.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
They don't need heroes they can aspire to be when they grow up. They need heroes they can assume the role of now.
Hey, fat kid. Good job.
My name is Horace.
I don't know if it'll help, or if anyone will care. I just know it was awesome to see me on the screen, kicking ass and killing monsters when I was just some loser kid. And I wish more kids could feel that. The kicking ass part, not the loser part.
We came, we saw, we kicked its ass!
We done?